Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Before we start tonight's story, I would just like to say if you have a story or a creepy encounter experience you'd like to share with us on the show, please do send that over to me at deadmantalking666@gmail.com, or you can catch me at Twitter at dtalking666. I'd love to hear from you guys. Tonight's story is entitled Vampire in the National Forest. I used to be part of search and rescue for Parks Canada, but that all changed after something I experienced in the foothills 3 years ago. The horror I witnessed is a juxtaposition to the beauty of the surrounding primal landscape. There is something special about this land which is difficult to explain. It's so peaceful. This whole area was considered to be a sacred place by the Aboriginal people. This area is inhabited by the mighty buffalo, grizzly bears, wolves and mountain lions, among other prestigious animals. But there is something else that inhabits this land, something that has gone unseen for an incomprehensible amount of time. Dare I say that this thing must have witnessed a millennia go by. For all intents and purpose, I call it a vampire. And I don't mean a pale man with slicked black hair and a black cape with an Eastern European accent. In a way, this thing seemed almost like a force that has gone unseen in the wilderness, feeding off of unwary travellers. What it does to its prey is not unlike things we see in nature. It feeds like a parasite to continue its existence. This is, of course, me trying to make some kind of sense of what I've witnessed, to have some kind of grasp on the situation, to keep things in order. That year was chaos due to severe electrical storms that caused multiple forest fires, some of which were under control, while others caused massive damage in other areas. Health advisory services were recommending anyone with existing health issues remain indoors and avoid strenuous activity. But even that didn't keep the most rugged of determined outdoorsmen away. Often times the sky was hazy with billowing smoke that went on for miles, carried by the wind. There were fire bans set in place. Anyone caught with a fire at a campsite or even a fire pit in their backyard could earn them a hefty fine. Let me tell you about that day. Normally, it would have been a bright sunny day, typical of the season during that time of year. However, the sunlight was blotted out by the heavy smoke that arrived pre-dawn. The trouble started during the middle of the summer that year when a park ranger came across a reserved campsite that was in ruins. There was debris scattered all around the site. The tents had been shredded open and one was even completely collapsed. The car windows were smashed in and the roof had been torn open. The wreckage clearly showed there was some kind of struggle here sometime during the night. As it turned out, there was a family of 4 that had been using this campsite. It was a father and a mother with 2 daughters. The ranger determined that it was likely a bear attack and he called in for backup. The RCMP were called to the scene alongside search and rescue teams, and a massive search for the missing family commenced. The group I was with was about 10 miles south away from the campsite. That is how far out the scent dogs brought us, but still, there was no sign of the family at all. How in hell did we come all this way without finding anything? No blood, no objects, no nothing. There weren't even any footprints in the dirt, besides deer tracks. The area we ended up in was thick brush dominated by brooding spruce trees and rocky cliffs. The canines started to act up. They began whining and howling with fright, tucking their tails between their legs and hiding behind the dog handlers, who were trying to control them desperately. This was, of course, highly unusual. It's like they either saw or caught scent of something they didn't like. But what was it? I was several meters behind the group, who were arguing about the dogs and which direction to take. I kept glancing around because I myself started feeling anxious. Despite the summer heat, I had that strange sensation of someone walking over my grave. Do you know what I mean? My whole body shivered. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up on end, and goosebumps formed on my skin. There was another feeling too, the indistinct feeling of being watched. I spun around looking in every direction, looking at the trees and the rocks, but there was nothing of note to see. What happened next, I cannot truly explain. It was against procedure, but I felt compelled to start moving towards an old, overgrown hiking trail in the southeast. I felt like I was being pulled by something unseen, but that notion didn't occur to me at the time. I just felt the need. Maybe I wanted to get away from the other search and rescue members who were arguing among each other with the tracking dogs going crazy. Beyond the thick brush, I discovered a cave entrance in the ground. At the cave mouth, I spotted something bright. It was a child-sized shoe with pink stripes on the side of it. I felt my heart sink in my chest. I looked up at the smoky sky and let out a sigh. I noticed an opening in the dark, hazy sky, and a beam of sunlight hit me in the face. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it into the opening of the ground. The sloping ground showed signs of something being dragged downwards. I let out a whimper as I entered the cave. I knew there were caves in the area, but I had never actually gone into one, and especially not alone. But as I stated, I felt like something was calling to me. That's the only way I could describe it. I had to crab walk through the entrance, but when I reached flat ground, I could stand fully upright. 20 feet into the cave and the stagnant air took hold and the darkness was becoming oppressive, but I still continued pushing downwards. I stopped and listened very carefully. There was only complete silence and unforgiving darkness. I shined the light around the cavern and spotted something on the wall. It was an ancient petroglyph carved right into the cave wall. It depicted men chasing a buffalo herd off the cliff. I traced my finger along the primitive art. Pushing onward into the unknown, I found an object on the cavern floor. It was what appeared to be a very old leather canvas bag. I picked it up and blew dust off of it. I unbuckled it and took a look inside. There was a rusted water canteen, a bronze compass, and a leather-bound book, and to my surprise, a very old-looking pistol. In fact, it was a flint stock pistol, which was dated 1715. I dropped to my knees and grabbed the book out of the bag. The writing on the cover read, "Le Demon." I remained still on my knees, trying to comprehend what I was seeing, trying to make sense when a noise startled me. It didn't sound like it was right next to me, but rather it came from somewhere deeper in the cave. It sounded like something being broken or snapped. And so, I continued my search for the missing family. They had to be down here. The glow of the flashlight showed that I had to make my way down another slope. At the bottom, I saw something that caused me to freeze. I saw a pair of feet, one bare foot missing a shoe, the other one wearing a white shoe with pink stripes. Oh God, tears began to well up in my eyes. Complete sadness had taken over me. I had indeed found one of the missing family members, a young girl who couldn't have been older than 9. I gasped in horror at what I saw. First was the look of complete terror frozen onto her face. There were horrible wounds on her necks and arms. She was completely white, as if all the blood had been drained out of her. My heart was beating in my heart. My heart was beating in my heart like a jackhammer. I was starting to have difficulty breathing. I began to shake. My fingers began to feel numb. There was more damage than just the horrible wounds. You see, her head was at an odd angle. It was obvious that her neck was broken. The cold indifference of the universe blasted my mind, and I began to sob uncontrollably. I frantically reached for the only thing I could use to defend myself. Something that worked against animals. My flare gun. If there was some kind of animal down here, I knew I could scare it off. A shuffling sound caused me to back up against the tunnel wall. Something was in here with me. Nausea began to take hold of me, and my mind felt like it was swirling. I was feeling cold, but sweat was running down my face. With trembling hands, I summoned the courage to move the flashlight into the direction to the source of the sound. My sanity was holding on for dear life. And when I saw the thing, I thought I was going to die right on the spot. The very sight of the being, the very knowledge that this creature exists, reached right down into the greatest depths of my psyche. Right down into the primal fear that exists in all living things. I wanted to retreat, but I could not. This is what I saw in the dark cave system. Have you ever read a National Geographic magazine or watched the Discovery Channel? If you have, then you are probably familiar with the Otzi, the Iceman. The man whose frozen corpse was frozen in a glacier for thousands of years in the Alps. That is what I could compare this thing to be like. Its leathery, discoloured skin was pulled tight to its emaciated skeletal frame. Its mouth was filled with yellow razor-sharp teeth that dripped with blood. In fact, its mouth and chest were smeared with fresh blood. This thing wasn't even looking at me. It was crouched on top of a pile of bodies that belonged to the rest of the missing family. The mother and the daughter had their throats torn out, as well as their necks snapped. On top of the pile, directly beneath the creature, was the father, who had the beast face buried in his neck. Its eyes were closed as it drained the man of his blood. A terrible sucking sound came from the act, like that of a thirsty animal desperate for water. It withdrew its fangs from the poor soul's neck and proceeded to cruelly snap it. It began to emit a strange guttural clicking, as if it was satiated from its feeding. It slowly turned its head towards me. Its eyes snapped open. The eyes were like black marbles, but its pupils were red. This thing, this monster, this vampire had to be ancient. Strange thoughts raced through my mind, like, where did it come from? What were the things that it had seen throughout its inhuman existence? I felt like my mind was starting to slip. Honestly, it began to stand upright, continuing to stare right at me, continuing to make that strange chattering sound. Then it took one step towards me. The flare gun! Quick! And I pointed it directly at the thing and pulled the trigger. There was a loud bang in the cave, and the entire room was lit up with a glowing red light. To my complete shock, the living nightmare was holding the burning flare in one of its hands. I could see it grinning at me with just joy across its face. I retreated out into the cavernous room and bolted just as the creature let out an otherworldly growl. This thing was going to kill me. I was going to fall victim to it, just like the poor family. I ran as fast as I could. My body was scraping against the cavern walls. I could see daylight just up ahead, the cave entrance. I must get there. I crawled up as fast as I could, pushing my body to its limits. I spilled out onto a surface area facing a bright blue sunny sky. The smoke had finally cleared, at least for now. The spruce trees gently swayed in the winds just overhead. I clumsily got up to my feet and backed away from the entrance to the cave. The creature never emerged from the darkness of its subterranean lair. I could just make out a set of glowing red orbs moving in the darkness. It was the eyes of that fiendish creature. I could tell it was pacing side to side, but it never emerged. That's how I knew it was the sunlight that was preventing it from coming out to drag me back down into those depths of the unknown. The rest of the team hurried through the brush and found me in complete shock. I told them that I'd found the family down in the cave, and then I told them that something was down there. Armed policemen and park rangers went down there and found the remains of the family, but there was no sign of what had killed them. I quit the very next day. Wow, I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Please do let me know in the comments below. Please do like and share. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe to stay up to date with all Dead Man Talking 666 content. We have a lot coming up over the next few months. Remember folks, be safe, not sorry.